So I think the plan now is to do an activity where we're going to discuss some of the issues in more detail. BERA would be very grateful for your thoughts, your notes, which we will use directly as we look to, for example, write the BERA statement, which is a statement that comes out of all the projects. And as we think about, well, what might we do practically? And as we think about how might this group, for example, or groups similar to this come together again in the future, what kind of momentum might we build? So on your tables, there are sheets of paper with a list of bullet points, some of which are highlighted in yellow. Now, the history of these is my first attempt to draft something coherent out of all of the projects, followed by Vivian's analysis of that and some revisions, and followed by Nick sort of suggesting that we might turn this into a sort of more succinct version for today. So as you can hear, it's very much in draft form. So you really are arriving at a point as we wrestle with what's the best thing we can say to people in every education department in the UK. What can BERA do? What can we all do collectively? So each group's got 2 different bullet points to discuss. If you could take some time to discuss the first 2 highlighted in yellow, and we thought roughly half an hour, and then you could do the next 2 in yellow for another half an hour. Now, that timing is quite loose. It's difficult to predict how much talk you will generate, and of course we're not saying don't look at other things, but if you could look at the yellow ones and keep some notes, be prepared to share some ideas. We've got some people who are going to work with us, and I think other tables will have to do their own. Nick, have you got a sense of what we've got in terms of people taking notes, or three of you? Yeah, so it may be, yeah, thank you. And I suggest maybe these 2 groups join together if that's all right. Nick, tea and coffee. Right, so we'll do this. Bit of feedback, and then we'll all finish with tea and coffee, yeah? All right, good. So if that's okay, off you go.
Stop points.
Sorry to break up the conversations there. It was brilliant. I very much enjoyed the opportunity to try and tease out some practical strategies. I enjoyed it so much they've said I can talk on behalf of the group, but not yet. Maybe I can start with this group. Could I ask everyone to start with their top 2 points, if you like, and we'll keep going round, and we're going to finish. Nick, you've got a few things just to wrap up on. Is that right? Later? Next steps things. Yeah, all right. Who's the... double act.
Do you want to go first? You go first.
Can we speak to the mic because it's recording so we can capture the...
Okay, and Jess is going to chip in as well if we need anything. So we were looking at the higher 2 bullet points about gender and minority ethnic representation. We felt like there needed to be a little bit more nuance and specificity needed around how we understand different social groups and the work that they do and their identities. And we were thinking about sort of more awareness and focus on more intersectional understandings of those experiences. And this led us to thinking about kind of how we build the sustainability and development opportunities of researchers at different stages of their career, how we invest in them. And I guess in terms of practical strategies, we were quite interested in a mentoring program, perhaps led or co-led by BERA, which isn't just kind of rooted in institutions, but is more outward facing and allows a sort of more diverse way of thinking about and supporting researchers within the discipline. Yes. Is there anything else you want to add there, Jess?
Maybe just on the mentoring point, because you picked it up, I think, Gemma, you mentioned it earlier, about how mentoring can be best used to actually be useful. And, you know, some of us would have had bad experiences of mentoring and some of us would have had really good experiences of mentoring. But it's also important that we don't, like, give the whole responsibility of mentoring onto the already minoritized and marginalized groups within education research, and that there's actually a sense of like good quality mentoring and also collective responsibility about making sure that there are these pathways for early career researchers and other academics in education research as well.
Over to Sean.
Thank you. So we were looking at the questions around the variation in conditions in different kinds of universities. Yeah, we were looking at the questions around variation in conditions across different kinds of universities in the system and implications of excessive workload. So we reckon that the insecurity in education departments is around funding, and that's what's threatening working conditions in the sector. This is compounded by fragile investment in strengthening the research capacity in the field overall. Those we saw as the problems. In terms of possible solutions, we thought the metric and the ref should encourage institutions to collaborate with each other in the interests of their future and the discipline as a whole. We thought there's a piece of work to do on research funding in education, where it comes from, where it goes, how it's divvied up, and how it changes over time. We wanted to reimagine regional collaboration between HEIs, and overall we felt the important thing was ultimately investment in research capacity.
Okay, to this group.
Thanks. So I think we spent quite a bit of time keep coming back to that figure about the 0.05% investment and how that compared to health, and you know the point you were just making about investment in research, and we saw that perhaps reflected in the permanent contracts thing. So this is perhaps a bit of a backward way of looking at things, but that suggests that there are not that many staff on research-only contracts, who are the people who are often funded by those research grants that education probably isn't getting in the same way that other disciplines perhaps are. And we think there's a real role for BERA there in sort of putting the case for that. On the other hand, we were looking at the proportion of teaching-only staff and thinking that if education can't celebrate the teaching in higher education route for its own sake, then we've probably got a bit of a problem. And the important thing is not so much that those people are not doing, you know, the sort of formally classified research, because they probably are, but it's having a real strong pathway for career development along those lines. And then we started talking about the identification of, or the different numbers that we've got and different measures that we've got of who is in and who is out of educational research. So I think we were looking at this bullet point on the back, which was saying that only half of the people in the Warwick survey were entered for the ref, but we've got different measures with different numbers in. And I think I'm going to hand over to Lynn, because Lynn had a really positive take on this, I think, which we were persuaded by.
Oh, well, I will try, Paul. Hi, everyone. I'm Lynn Ang, Professor Lynn Ang. I'm based at the Institute of Education. It's great to see colleagues here. We had a very robust discussion around everything, so this has been a really useful discussion point. The point I think that we did go over was the importance of the role of BERA, but also the ref. And the point I make is that I think we got to also be mindful that the ref essentially is an institutional strategy in all different levels. And in many ways, the health of the discipline, which is precisely what we are discussing here, is important with or without the ref. So I think it's really important that we disentangle the two. So that's the first thing to say. I mean, my reading of the statistics that we've just looked at in the last session, I think it's really interesting. And well, me being the kind of an optimist, the fact that, you know, we on several of the measures, it has increased our performance, despite the fact that there's a slight dip in the environment. So I think that's something that we need to also celebrate about and not be too, not to be too hard on ourselves. But of course, we always have room for improvement. So that's the first thing to say. And I think the second thing to say is to be very clear about what the ref is trying to achieve as across all institutions and what BERA wants to achieve, because it's to in my role at the moment as kind of pro-director and vice dean of research, I've always said, the environment is really important. I want colleagues at Institute of Education to be the best researcher, the best academic they can be. It's not about the ref. So I think that's really important because, if we are excellent at what we do and we are passionate at what we do, the rest will come. The ref really shouldn't really dominate what the state of discipline, as it were. So I think those were the key discussions that we had.
Very much. Whoever spoke, were you speaking? Thank you. Richard?
Okay, just to add one or 2 points to the self-identification bullet point, which is the fourth one from the end on page 2. We felt that there was a division, I think, within the discipline. And I guess I'm being slightly controversial here by suggesting that there are failures on both leadership and management, and a wider systemic failure if we're thinking about inclusion, equity, and equality within the academy. And think also of collegiality here. Self-identification, theoretically, we believed, gives you research time, but no guarantee of entry to the ref, as was discussed in the previous presentation, which focused on 4-star and 3-star publications, which, again, theoretically dictates the new ref cycle. And it gets worse than that, so I'll stop there, because I do respect what colleagues have already said about the importance of ref as well. The solution is perhaps more collaboration, and cross-institutional collaboration. But then again, this is perhaps exclusive in certain institutions and with certain colleagues. So we believe that the ref inequalities continue. We looked at methodology, and again, there were mixed views here, but we agree that the debates, the methodological debates, continue. They're important if colleagues can teach quants and qual. And that's not just in education, but that's in psychology as well, we discussed. So that's important. And there's the danger that, again, within education, that the focus is on qual rather than quants and mixed methods, let alone other methodological approaches. And again, one example that I can give, being a reviewer of a journal, is critical quants within the Journal of Ethnicities. But that wasn't taught to me, and that wasn't taught to me by colleagues in the institution that I used to work in. And in many respects, we suggested that the methodological debates have been replaced by the culture of publication, which again goes back to sort of the old neoliberal market forces idea that we discussed in the self-identification bullet point.
Okay. Actually, what I will do is just remind myself of these. So, given that you've made already some of the points that we discussed as well, let me perhaps focus on a couple of even more practical things. So, considering representation of different groups and the lack of representation or the over-representation but lack of promotion, etc., we thought that it was really important to identify people in a sensitive way with promise who fitted the right kind of criteria, whether it was the criteria for becoming a researcher mainly or becoming an excellent teacher mainly, identifying people early, especially from underrepresented groups, and then supporting them in particular to try and give them a sense of confidence that they can succeed, because confidence was identified as one of the many factors that gets in the way for some people. And for example, it was suggested that perhaps males are more typically able to put themselves forward, whereas maybe females are less so and would benefit from this support to develop the confidence. I know it's a generalization. We thought that right at the point that people join an institution, so induction points, promotion should be kind of put on the radar. So these are the opportunities you'll have. This is what the university hopes you'll be able to achieve, whether that is, again, mainly on a research trajectory or mainly on a teaching trajectory or a combination. And we discussed the differences between research-only contracts and teaching and research contracts and so on. Part of this early identification we thought should go even before people become members of a university department. So there was the suggestion to, for example, even identify PGCE students who are underrepresented, note that build a relationship, sustain a relationship over time, over years maybe, in the hope that they may come back in and become part of a university department. And there are lots of examples where, for example, PGCE programs do have practicing teachers who come in for periods of time. It's like an internship or a partner arrangement. So we could be more savvy, perhaps, about actively seeking out the kinds of colleagues we want to encourage with the right fledgling qualifications. And then we also looked at workload. Of this, we thought that maybe research staff on research-only contracts needed to be treated more similarly to people on teaching and research contracts. The classic difficulty is that research-only contracts often disallow you from teaching almost, and I was saying I bend the rules a little bit with some of my research staff where I can. We need a bit more wholesale rule bending perhaps on that. And generally, I think we agreed with what some of the comments made about mentoring. We need it to be early, high quality, systematic, and that, of course, I know places quite a heavy burden on heads of department, but maybe some of these messages need to go to, I don't know, provosts and VCs, and who knows whether they would listen to BERA. And at that point, I'll turn to Nick and say, Nick, would you like to round up?
Well, I'm not going to say very much. I'm going to say just a few practical points. One of which is that if there's any other comments or points people want to raise from this today, then please do let us know. Leadership Committee is going to be having another sort of discussion on this in a sort of 3 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time, of the sort of the BERA statement of the next steps, and then BERA Council in September will be meeting to review sort of all the various initiatives as a whole and decide what happens next, as it were. In terms of the outputs, Dom, you mentioned earlier that we've published a series of some of the case studies from 4-star case study institutions. Careful how I phrase that because of the nature of the REF classification. That came out end of last week. We'll send the link round sort of following this, but please do sort of send those round, and hopefully they can be used as examples of the good that education research can make. And we felt that it was important. Many of these reports raise some difficult questions for us to think about and look, and we're not wanting to overlook those, but at the same time it's also important to celebrate the positive messages that come out. And if organisations like BERA don't champion the success of education research, then who does? So that has come out and is part of this project. And then the final output will be the write-up of the work that Bernie was previewing the outcomes of today, and that will be out as well in the next few weeks, we hope, as the sort of the final publication of this stage of this piece of work. And I mean, it is a kind of piece of work that BERA has not really engaged in before in terms of length of time and the commitment to it and the investment in it and sort of the research that we've commissioned as a direct result of it. So part of what we need to do as an organisation is review the effectiveness of it, and as a method of our own work going forward, so it'd be really good to get some feedback on that. So I think that's it in terms of that. Do you want to add anything at this stage, Vivian? Or no? Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, please do send any comments and remarks, because as you can see, it's a very important piece of work we've done by commissioning the research and getting these reports. But we have opened a bit of a Pandora's box in terms of what all the issues are that need to be addressed, and we can't just say, oh, here are the issues and no bye-bye. So we do need to think about what are we going to do. and particularly the practical steps. And just listening to the feedback just now, there's 2 or 3 ideas there already that we can discuss as a leadership team and think about how to take those forward. And any more ideas you get, and if you're like me and you get your best ideas on the train or the tube going home, then please do try and send them in, because we will build these into the BERA statement, and hopefully we can use that to begin to exert some influence as well. And thank you everybody for giving up time to come, because I know how pressured you all are, and we really do appreciate it.
No, just to echo that, and also say that we, as you will know, we did record the presentation of the sessions today, and these will be sent out. And I think one of the things we want to do is get some of the findings of these outputs into as many different audiences as possible. So if there's opportunities or places you think that would be good to hear from some of this, then please do get in touch and we can see what we can do in terms of that. And then on a very mundane level, it's just to say there is tea and coffee available in the room if anyone does want to stay behind and carry on the conversation informally beyond the formal close of this. But Dom, did you want to just round up? Or?
Is this me saying it's the end of the State of the Discipline project, Nick? Not quite. All right. Well, the only other thing I'd say is, do you have anything other than mundane tea and coffee? Or No, just to echo the thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it. We're getting, as it were, at the coalface impressions for the very first time. Thank you also to all the research teams for their incredible work. And we hope to see you all again at some point. And for now, enjoy your mundane tea and coffee.